Hi, my name is Connie Gross, and I'm an infant and early childhood mental health consultant for the Children's Resource Center in Bowling Green, Ohio. And today we're going to talk about how to raise children who care about others, really focusing on empathy. So, before we dive into how we can teach this, I thought we should start with a definition about what empathy really means. And so, Webster's dictionary defines empathy as the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. So, this is something we hear a lot as consultants when we're helping families with children who sometimes can have some aggressive behaviors. And we often hear from teachers and parents that their children don't show empathy, that when they hurt someone, they don't really give the response that the grown-ups were hoping for or expecting. And so we're going to look at today, how can we teach empathy, and then how could we practice that skill so it could be something that our children are better able to use. Before we really dive into looking at empathy though, I wanted to just touch for a minute on the difference between empathy and sympathy. A lot of times these words are used interchangeably, but they do mean two different things. And so this picture is just a simplistic illustration of the difference between the two. Empathy is when you feel the pain someone else is experiencing. And so this could be like if your best friend calls today and maybe they're crying and upset, and you might even be moved to tears, and maybe you're feeling a little ache in your heart just because of what your friend is going through. You're experiencing emotion because of their emotion. Where sympathy is a bit different. It's where you hear or see someone is upset and you're sorry that they're upset, but it doesn't evoke any emotion in you. So this might be where your friend calls today and they're telling you about a bad day they've had, and your response might be something like, "Oh, that stinks," and then you just maybe kind of move on from that. So you can recognize and understand that they're feeling a certain way, but it doesn't cause you to feel that way. So today we're going to talk about what are some ways that we can teach empathy. And one of the number one ways we can teach, really honestly, most skills, but empathy included, is by modeling. So children who receive empathy from their caregivers and adults are more likely to be able to give empathy to others. This quote by W.E.B. Du Bois says, "Children learn more from what you are than what you teach." And so thinking about when our children are upset or having some strong emotions, how do we respond to them? So you see in the image on the screen, this mom or caregiver is gone to the child who's upset. She's got her arm around her. She's kind of sitting with her in that feeling. So showing our children that we are care and we're with them during those emotions can be a great way of modeling empathy so that they're better able to do that when someone else is upset. The second thing we can do to teach empathy is labeling feelings. And this feelings chart on the screen is just a free feelings chart I found online. You can certainly Google and come up with all kinds of feelings charts. And it can be handy to even have one of those maybe on your phone, just taking a screenshot or device. But you could also maybe print them and hang them on the fridge or in maybe a calm down spot or your child's room. A couple of things that labeling feelings does is that the first is that it helps children label their own feelings. And this can be great in self-regulation and them being able to communicate how they're feeling and express those feelings in an appropriate way, they need to have the vocabulary for that. So it's not uncommon for young children to be pretty familiar with happy, mad, sad, and then maybe much less familiar with some of those other feeling words. But what we do know is children will use the emotion language they're exposed to. So this is just a start of some other feeling words, but there's actually lots and lots of feeling words we could use when we're labeling how we feel and even labeling how they feel. The second thing that labeling feelings does is it helps children to recognize feelings in others. So when we put a label on that feeling, it helps them form a connection in their brain between maybe the way our face looks or our body language or the way our voice sounds to how we're feeling. And that can be really helpful in being able to identify the feelings other people are having, which is a key component to having empathy for someone else. There's also a lot of things you could do with a feelings chart like this. You could use this to help your child identify their own feelings by maybe asking, it seems like you're upset. Do you feel like any of these pictures, or do any of these children look the way you're feeling? So they could maybe point at one of them. You could possibly point at one of them and maybe say something like, she's sad and your face kind of looks like her face. Are you feeling sad right now? You could also use something like this to even play feelings games with your kiddos. One example could be using a piece of paper like this with these faces on it and saying something like, I'm going to make my face look like one of these, and you have to try to guess which one of these faces I'm making. And then they can have a turn too. Obviously, when you start this, children might not be great at it. They might need some practice, but you're going to find that as you use it more, they're going to build skill in it, and they're going to be better able to communicate their own feelings. They're going to be better able to recognize feelings in others. And they're also going to be better at this third one here, which is helping with perspective taking. Perspective taking is the idea that you can kind of walk in the shoes of someone else. And it's an important component for empathy, is that you have to be able to understand the experience that someone has gone through that might evoke certain feelings and might evoke feelings in us. So perspective taking is another component that we get from helping our children to label feelings. The third thing we can do to teach empathy is praising them when they show empathy. And so we want to really look for opportunities where our child shows empathy, and then we want to specifically praise that behavior. I have a picture here on the screen, and this could really happen in anyone's home. We could maybe guess that the older child who has her head down is maybe the older sister, and the younger child then sees that she's upset and has gone over to her and put her arm around her and just kind of sitting with her in that time where she's feeling sad or upset. And so there might be lots of opportunities where we see things like this happening in our home, and we might specifically praise them with something like I typed on the screen. That was very kind to check on her when she started crying. That was being a kind sister. So that's one example. The other one listed there says, you saw that he was sad and you offered him one of your cards. That was so friendly. So some really nice components to these types of praise statements is that first we're labeling a feeling. So you saw he was sad. So we're kind of reinforcing that idea that they recognized a feeling, and we're maybe putting a label to that. But then also we're kind of pointing out the thing that they did that we want to see more of, that empathy piece of that. So you checked on her, or you offered him a toy, something like that. And then the third part of that is really labeling that behavior as caring, friendly, helpful, thoughtful. Those are all praise statements that can help build our child's self-esteem too, because we're labeling that behavior in a positive light. And what we know is what we pay attention to, we're likely to see more of. So as we catch our children showing empathy, we really want to point it out so that we can see empathy happening more frequently. It's also important to know that in the beginning, we might not see tons of opportunities. So we might have to be really intentional. It might be catching our children doing things like taking a tissue to their sibling, or sharing a toy, or even just patting them on the back. It doesn't have to be a huge, significant steps every time. And even grown-ups don't always show empathy in huge ways every time. So catching them doing those empathetic types of behaviors and praising them specifically so that they know we like that and we want to see more of it. So those are the primary ways we can teach empathy. I wanted to talk about some ways we could practice empathy too. And so we're going to just take a look at all 5 of these ways that we could practice empathy, and give you some examples of those. The picture on the screen, they could be siblings, but this also could be a situation just at a park where maybe that child's not, really crying or overly upset, but it does look like he's maybe a bit withdrawn, sitting alone, got his legs drawn up. And so just the act of your child going over and inviting them to play or asking them if they're okay, getting them a grown up. All of those are empathetic type behaviors. And so we do want to try to kind of catch those behaviors and praise them so that our child might be more likely to do those in the future. So one of the first things you can do to practice empathy is ask your child to help care for living things. Now, you know your child best, so depending on their age and what you feel like they're capable of, this might look a bit differently for different households and different age children. But if you have pets, letting your child care for a pet in some capacity, it might be feeding them, but maybe it's helping you feed them or brushing them, helping you give them a bath, helping to take them on walks, finding some ways that we can talk to our children about how animals need cared for, and that if we don't meet their needs, then they're not going to be as healthy or well. And so it's important for us to take care of them, to nurture them. And that can be true too with plants. Plants are also a living thing. It's not uncommon for preschool classrooms to have this as a job in their classroom, where a child might be in charge of watering a plant and making sure that it's getting some sunlight from the window and not too much sunlight. And again, even plants give us the opportunity to talk about gentle touches and how we have to take care of plants so that they can be healthy and grow happy. Another opportunity to practice the skill of empathy is called picture practice. And this is a resource that we use a lot with teachers and parents at Children's Resource Center. They're just pictures of children who are feeling upset in some way. And we kind of talk through these questions on the side. And so I just copied a card and put it right on this slide. It could look like a lot of different things, but the primary questions are, what do you think's happening in this picture? How do you think he's feeling? And how could we help? And so this offers a lot of great discussion. Your child might come up with a lot of different answers, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. The real idea is that they're practicing the skill of trying to figure out what's going on and how he feels. So your child could look at this picture and maybe say, someone took his bath, or it's time to clean up, or his tower fell over. Any of those could be correct. And so we can go with any storyline they come up with. Let's say his tower fell over. How do you think he feels? Again, your child might say mad, sad, disappointed. Any of those could be correct. It's not so much what is the right answer, but more about your child getting the opportunity to look at that other child's face, read kind of the situation that might be happening, and then figuring out how they feel. So maybe your child says he's sad. And then the next step is, well, what could we do to help? So encouraging him to think of some ways that can maybe help that child. For example, rebuilding the tower. This offers so many great opportunities because it's not only building empathy, but also problem solving skills. And it offers us the opportunity to practice those in a lot of different ways. These picture practice cards were made just by Googling upset children and looking at the images. You could do that with any image that you feel like is appropriate for your child to look at. And the really best part about this is that this is something that could be done anytime because you don't really need any materials to do it. So for example, if you're waiting in the car while an older child is at soccer practice, you could Google upset children, choose one of the images, pull it up on your phone, and just kind of walk through these questions. What do you think's happening here? How does the child feel? If you saw this happen, what could you do to help? If you're able to do that, it can help your child be more empathetic and build their problem solving skills. And so you could do that lots of times during the day or week. Maybe at soccer practice, like I already mentioned, but you could do that sitting in a restaurant while you're waiting for your food to be brought to you, or during the bath, or other times, maybe at the bus stop when you're waiting, you have some moments of waiting. This is a go-to activity you could just pull out to really build some skill. The second strategy for practicing empathy is from conscious discipline. Conscious discipline calls us the We Care Center. I tweaked that a bit for parents to use at home, so calling it maybe like the We Care bag or We Care box bin, something like that. But it's really just the idea that you would have a lot of caregiving items in one location so that your child could practice taking care of someone when they're hurt or upset. So the first one here in the image is called Boo Boo Cream. It's really just lotion that they've printed a label off, and there's lots of printable labels, but you can make your own label where you could create that for yourself too. And it's just some lotion that maybe your child has some type of boo-boo, but it's not needing like a Band-Aid or something. The lotion can offer some cooling and some safe, soft touch that can help them feel better. There's also Band-Aids. Oftentimes kiddos, the biggest part of a Band-Aid is them getting the Band-Aid, and then I don't know about you all, but my children frequently don't wear the Band-Aids very long, but just the idea of having a Band-Aid helps them feel better. And we might even offer Band-Aids when they're not bleeding because they have such strong healing power. Um, Oftentimes the dollar store has Band-Aids, so we can kind of invest in some of those and not feel too bad about if they maybe get overused a little bit. You could also have tissues in this spot, and encourage young children to go get a tissue for someone when they're crying or upset. You might have some type of comfort item like a stuffed animal. I've also listed some things that you could consider putting in a We Care location. One of them is note cards, and this could look like a lot of different things, but a note card might be something that a child could use to draw a picture for someone who's sad. Depending on their age, maybe they could write them a note. And I have stickers on down the list, but they could even use stickers to make a picture for a child that they want to maybe give them the idea of like a get well card type of situation. You might have some type of fidget in this area, which is just something that your child might like to squeeze and play with while they're getting calm. I saw a teacher one time had some fake flowers in her calm down or we care area. And that's just the idea that, if someone is feeling sad or having kind of a down day or time, you can maybe go offer them some flowers and they would get to, hold the flowers or keep them at their seat or with them, for a short period of time. You can oftentimes buy fake flowers at the dollar store too. The next one is an ice pack, and you're probably not going to have an ice pack right there in the We Care Center because generally it does need to be in the freezer. So you might think about either drawing a picture or having some type of visual, a printable something visual that you could keep in that area to remind your child that that is an option. And oftentimes schools will take sponges and maybe even cut them in halves or fourths depending on the side, and then they will just get them wet and put them in a Ziploc bag and freeze them. So those are kind of quick, easy ice packs that children could get for other children. And they also like soften as they start to melt. And so they're not as much maybe of a danger as like hard ice cubes or something like that. Another thing you could have in there is some fun sunglasses. So again, just when a child is feeling upset or down, we can offer them some wacky sunglasses to wear. Stickers can often help kiddos to feel better. And you might have some other visuals of things that couldn't necessarily go in the bag, but maybe like a hug visual or a high five visual for a child who is feeling sad and needs some connection to feel better. The next way we can practice empathy is by using social stories. So a social story is a story that's specific to some social emotional behavior. This one is on empathy and it is available online for free. You're going to see the website at the very end of this presentation. But this social story goes through a short story where a pup is able to show empathy and receive empathy in different situations. The other thing we can do, especially when we use social stories, but all the time, is do role plays. And because our brains grow by experiences, role play is a great way to simulate experiences, and so therefore helping to grow our brain in that area. The important thing about a role play is that we want to make sure that children see the concrete example of what we want them to do. So in a role play where we're trying to practice empathy, it might be something like, let's pretend like you're playing with your toys and I'm going to take one of your toys, okay? So we role play that, and then I say, how would you feel if I took your toy? And of course your child will be able to say, that would make me sad, or I would get mad. And we can talk through that. Well, what should happen, right? We should, share the toys or play with them together, get a timer. There's a lot of different solutions to that. We just want to make sure that when we go back and role play that then we go back and role play one of the solutions too. We don't want our kiddos to leave that learning experience with only having seen the negative interaction. We want to leave that experience with them having seen the positive and how we would really like that situation to go in the future. So maybe we still role play the negative and we talk about it, and then if they say we would share the toys, then we'll say, okay, let's practice. Let's pretend like this time we're playing together with the toys. And so we leave them with that concrete example of the types of behavior we want to see. There's also a lot of children's books about empathy and building empathy. Some of them are specific, like that's the storyline is about showing empathy. Sometimes it's more of an undertone, like something's happening in the story and a character does show empathy. And it's especially important in those situations that we point out those empathetic things that are happening, because children might not always catch on to them. So for example, if we're reading a story where something happens and maybe the story is really overall about picking apples. But at one point, the basket falls over and they work together to clean it up. That is an opportunity for us to point out in the story, oh, look, I bet he was sad when they dropped the basket of apples. And then his brother came and helped him clean it up. That was so kind. So really pointing out the way they're caring for each other during that time. Listed here are some resources for you if you would like to use some of these strategies and practice with your child to try to build and encourage empathy in them. The top one there is my email address, connieg@crcwoodcounty.org. Feel free to email me any questions, or if you're looking for any of these resources, I would be happy to provide them to you. There's also tons of information on conscious discipline and 0 to 3 about all types of social emotional wellness. So please feel free to check those out. And a lot of the free resources that I got today, like the feelings visual and the social story about PIP, came from Teachers Pay Teachers. The second line there is the direct link to that social emotional story. Feel free to check out that website. There are lots of resources on there that you do have to pay for, but there's tons of resources that are also free. And so that can be a great way to build some social emotional resources to use with your child. We also have a YouTube video about lots of different topics related to young children's social emotional wellness. So if you check out our YouTube channel on Children's Resource Center, you'll find about 25 videos, and there's more being uploaded every day about different things like helping your child when they're having a tantrum, or how to create a calm down spot at home, how to increase self-help skills, how to use a communication style that will help your child to listen, and even understanding their temperament better. So there's tons and tons of great videos there that can help us better understand our children and give us ideas about how we can better meet their social emotional needs. So check us out on YouTube, the Children's Resource Center, and we also have a Facebook page, so check that out too. Thank you for watching our video today, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me.